Welcome back to the Cyber Queens podcast, where we are talking all things getting into and succeeding as a woman in cyber, trying to inspire you, Gen Z, to help us close this gender gap. I'm one of your hosts, Maril Vernon, resident offensive and hacking expert. I'm joined by Natalie.
And I'm Natalie Baker, SOC manager and all things blue team.
Yes. Blue team, red team, one team, two team. Today, we are here talking to you about something that is a crucial skill that is kind of losing its prominence in the balance, which is talking technically to technical audience. And we wanted to bring this up because there are a lot of people mid-career pivoting into cyber. There are a lot of soft skills that are very important in cyber, like the ability to speak layman. But a lot of us are losing the ability to accurately convey technical concepts to technical audiences who don't want the layman summary. They want you to get into the weeds of the code and the syntax and the utilities and all those things. So that's what we're talking about today. Natalie, what are your feels? Give them to me.
I just have to say this is a really great topic because soft skills are really important. And you have to know your audience. It's very important to know who you're talking to.
It is.
Like
Definitely
if you're talking to a client, if you're talking to a client, they might not understand the technical, speak at all. Sometimes we'll have to go through reports and be like, let's spell this out a little bit further for this, client. Whereas if you have like a client that is very technical and has a technical team, they have their own security team, and you're just like the backup, then you just have, you can speak a little bit more technically. You don't have to spell it out as much, but you can go into a little bit more detail with them as well.
That's a great strategy. I feel like a great way to always approach these situations is when you're in a mixed audience, or like you don't typically talk to these people. They're not your typical stakeholders. They're not your usual IT team. You might not know who you're speaking to, especially people like Erica. I wish she was here to weigh in. Erica could talk about sales calls. You never know if you've got the lead architect online, or the GRC person, or the person who's just making a budget call. So I feel like it's always best to start out non-technical, start out with your analogies and your high level speak. And if someone comes up with a technical question, like, can you explain how your API would integrate with our vulnerability management software on the back end? You're like, oh, You know something technical. Let me get into that for you. And that's a great way to speak to that audience member while not excluding everyone else and leaving everyone else behind.
Yeah, and it's really important. Like if you speak down a little bit at the beginning and then you figure out, hey, this person really does know a bit of technical, and it's not just you have to know if they understand the technical jargon or if they're just using the technical jargon, because some people will just use technical jargon and they really don't. They'll just use that. It'll be like word vomit coming out of their mouth, and you're like, you're not even using the correct terms correctly.
You're not.
So
this is actually such a great thing to bring up because there are a lot of laymen who make their way into technical management roles, or even like higher echelons of technical leadership. For instance, I'm currently doing one-to-one sessions with someone right now who, rose to like a COO position. She's not a CTO or anything, but she rose to a C-level position for a very technical product, for like literally like an adversarial emulation product. And she's saying, she came from like a financial background. She's like, I have a hard time keeping up. I don't understand what they're saying. I don't understand where I should ask questions, how to refute, where to push back, where to ask for more, because I'm already lost when the conversation begins. So, it's so great to know the technical aspect of your job, because yes, using an analogy, explaining it to someone who's in your stakeholder meeting or your executive outbrief is going to be totally different than your technical outbrief. We literally have to generate, as pen testers, 3 different versions of our reports. There is the executive report, which does not have as much information as the stakeholder report, which does not have as much information as the technical deep dive that we have with the remediation teams who, want to know which binary we used, or which command we used to call a certain tool or access a certain console. So, if we were only able to have those technical conversations in a very like attack path manner, like, well, we got in and we called the console and then we pushed this branch of code to production, that doesn't help them at all. That doesn't help them do their jobs better. So it's one of those things where it helps you get on the same page with the teams who are going to be picking up the ball, like where you leave it off, like you hand the baton to them. And you need to be able to give technical lead-ins and give them a starting place, or you're actually doing your technical teams a disadvantage. Like, wow, we found something really bad. We found something really cool. like Natalie, I'm sure you're gonna speak to this
Yeah.
after me. I have something really cool and I do not know how to tell you how to fix it, but here it is. Like, what would you even do with that?
Figure out how you got in and then where our securities were like lacking at. That's what I would figure out is how you got through and like where we need to put an extra layer of security in place at. Where we need
But
to
it
alert at a little bit more. Maybe we need to tune in some alerts or tune out some alerts, like depending.
for sure. Um, I feel like so many people, it is important to come in, even if you don't have that technical, like we'll say that the technical vocabulary yet. I don't want that to be a barrier to your entry into cyber. Definitely come into cyber first. You can learn the jargon on the job. But like for me, the first thing I do every time I'm studying a new certification or a new subject matter is I flip to the back of the book to the glossary. I go to the glossary
Hmm.
and I memorize those terms because I'm like, if you're using a term, like the first time I encountered the word SIM, I'm like, so these logs will go to the SIM. I'm like, oh snap. What is a SIM? So I gotta go back there. It's the events manager. Okay. So every time the logs go, what you're saying really is to the events manager, the thing that's correlating the things. Now I understand what that means. But if I was just like, the logs are going to forward to the SIM via API, and then it's going to go to the SOC, and then it's like, oh snap, we're 3 acronyms deep, and I have no idea what's going on.
I Especially when I'm training entry level, I don't even like using acronyms. I like spelling it out for them unless I'm
Mhm.
quizzing them on an acronym that I've already taught them. Like, so if I say DNS a lot, that's going to be an acronym that I'm making sure that they understand right from the get go because, like, that's something that's really important for us to know which logs are doing what we're looking at when we're looking through these logs.
Yeah.
So I like to ensure that, like, from the very beginning, we kind of get on a base level. We kind of say, hey, what do you know? What don't you know? And let's fill in the gaps. And then every now and then I'll quiz them, but I don't start using that term regularly out of like just in DNS. Like, I don't just throw that out there randomly until I know that everybody's on that same level.
No, it's like learning a foreign language. It's like showing up to French
Yep.
1, day 1 of high school. It's like, this is a brand new language where we have our own syntax and our own grammatical rules. Like, I had to explain TTPs to someone the other day, and someone was like, well, you explain TTPs as like all the things, but you'll also refer to one TTP, but isn't one TTP technically just a procedure? It's just one of those things, right? I'm like, right. You're right, but colloquially, we will call them all TTPs and call one
Yep.
a TTP as well. Like it's got its own rules. All those rules out the window. But I agree. When I'm introducing, someone to a new concept, I'll be like, so then we're gonna forward it, or DLP. I was thinking of DLP. We're gonna forward it to the data loss prevention, the DLP system. So data loss prevention, and you want to like reinforce data loss prevention, DLP, the data loss prevention, DLP, and then the next time you'll be like, so hey, can you get into the DLP console and check that thing? And they should know, oh, data loss prevention, data loss prevention.
See, and I take it a step further. I'm like, do you know what DLP means? Like, what does it do? What is it? Like, what
I
is
was
the name of it? Like, I'll quiz people on it because that's like my favorite thing to do. I'm like, what is it? You think that you know, so what is it?
I was just gonna say that. Like the next thing is that people will just start using the acronyms as the noun without knowing what the noun is. They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
we send that to a DLP system, which checks it for us. I'm like, do you know what that is? They're like, yeah, the DLP. I'm like, yeah, do you know what the DLP is? Like, do you know how that functions? Like, no, I just know that we use it. And I'm like, okay, you can't just reference the thing without knowing what's behind the meaning of the word that you're saying. Like, it makes you
Yeah.
lose a lot of cred in certain technical audiences. And it tells me immediately that like, oh, I can't speak on that level with you. I need to take it a few steps down and water myself down a bit, bring myself to some layman level, like 50 layman, 50 technical. But learning the jargon, again, I flip to the back of the book first. This is basic situational awareness for literally any job, no matter what job you start. You're an auditor, you're a crime scene forensic investigator, you're a cop, you're a
You're
lawyer,
paralegal.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're in
Yeah. Let
you're
me
in
tell
IT.
you. You
Yeah,
start speaking in some like really like Italian phrases, like oh my, like
yeah,
and
lawyers aren't even fair.
Latin
You guys just switch
phrases.
into
It's
Latin
like
when you feel like
yeah,
it.
and it's at whim. So like, I mean, for the longest time, I was calling. I forget what it was, but there was like the certain type of document that we were filing, and I would call it something that was like completely off. And my boss would like correct me like 5 times.
I feel like I would be like that scene from the Bridesmaids. I'm like, yes, and then the lorem ipsum
Yeah.
was filed. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. But that's what I'm saying. It's basic situational awareness. If you want to be able to keep up in those conversations with Natalie, if you want to be able to keep up in those conversations with us, you need this foundational knowledge. Like you need to at least know what the terms that we're throwing around are. Even if you don't know how they work or how they function together, you need to know simply what the definition is. It's going to enable you to excel in your role quicker because again, if I'm like sending you random things to Google or having you put a presentation together or having you write a report, it reminds me of when I used to do IT recruiting. I would call and be like, yes, and they are looking for .NET. Do you have that? They're like, well, I mean, I've used .NET. And like, I didn't even know how to ask like
Yeah.
what the thing
Yeah.
was that I'm talking about. So like, you need to know this. It's going to help you learn your role, like at least to be able to hear conversations and start synthesizing things and start drawing broader themes together and not just sitting in a book or in an isolated lab. It helps you keep up in conversation. If you hear a bunch of us at the water cooler, I don't know if offices still use those. I ain't been in an office for a minute. Never going back, by the way. But if you hear certain if you hear us at the water cooler talking, or we're like, oh my God, can you believe they unplugged the F5 and now we got to reroute the ARC tables and the blah blah, and you're like,
What?
yeah.
You can just say what.
Yeah. Like, I mean, please come ask us what. That's how you learn. But wouldn't it be so cool to be able to keep up in those conversations? And even if you
You
don't have an opinion.
You start
Yeah.
to. You start
Yeah.
to after a while. I always tell my people like the first year in, you're gonna learn so much, and it's not gonna feel like you learned a lot at all. You're gonna feel like you still have no clue what you're doing. To this day, I still sometimes I'm like, do I really have a clue? And then like something happens, and I'm like, blah 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 blah, and it's just like natural for me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I do have a clue. It's the imposter syndrome that you have. Everybody has, but you know, one day something's just going to click, and then you're going to just start clicking, and it's going to keep clicking
Mhm.
for you because you're just building on that foundational knowledge. And eventually, 2, 3 years in, you're keeping up with some very advanced conversations that like 10 weeks ago or 2 years ago, you didn't think you could even have or hold or understand what was going on.
Exactly. Exactly. When people find out I'm 3 years into this field, like the way I talk about my work and I can talk about protocols and ports and certain frameworks and like how certain things, how I do my job. They're like, wow, you speak like someone who's been doing this for years. I'm like, yeah, I learned the teeny tiny pieces first and how to accurately say things before I started sounding unintelligent. But Natalie's right, imposter syndrome. Like, I want to say, if you don't know the jargon, if you don't know the words, don't be afraid to listen and don't be afraid to join the conversation, even if you don't have an opinion. You can just absorb. Um, I was always afraid to admit I didn't know something. And literally, I told these people, you're giving me a job in information security, knowing that I know nothing about information security, nothing technical at all. I don't even know what IP addresses are. Okay. So I have like carte blanche to be the stupid person in every room. And yet in meetings, still, I was afraid to be like, I don't know what that means. Can you explain that more? So I'd be like, uh-huh. Just Google that later, Google that later, Google that later. And my 20-year architect goes, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. He's like, I've worked in this industry a long time and come across a lot of technologies. I have no idea what you're saying. I'm gonna need you to back it up. And I'm like, oh, okay, if Bob
Yeah,
doesn't know, then I don't feel bad. But it just goes
girl.
to show you, no matter how long, you will never know it all. There's constantly new stuff I'm being exposed to, and I don't feel dumb being like, I don't know the difference between your SOAP API and your REST API and how this applies to my question. Can you give me some context? So leap right in. We don't know it all. I don't know it all.
No, I don't know it all either.
Mm-mm.
And
That's
like
why I
when
love
I first started in the field, like, I mean, to me, I would take the computer, throw it out the window, and that's how we fix the problem. You got your new computer, you're done. Like, that's how you fix the problem of any issue
this is a
on a
problem.
computer. That was it. That was the whole solution, was just get rid of the damn computer and get a new one in. And then and it's so funny because like that first year of just like being in the army and like going every day and doing different tasks. And I remember the first time I sat through like one of our like major audits that we had, that meeting, and everybody's just throwing the tech jargon across the table left and right, and I'm just like, what in the world is any of this? Like, yeah,
Words are
I'm
flying like
like,
bullets. You're like,
I am
okay.
just like, because I'm a handwritten note person. I'm not really a typing note person. So like I'm like can't like shorthanding some as much as I can and like just taking down the like main points. So like at the end of this meeting, the biggest thing that I found that I took notes on was that if you left your CAC unsecured, one person in the entire organization left their CAC unsecured, your entire unit failed the audit. So I would go around and start stealing people's CAC cards, and we made it a whole game.
Look at you go. Insider threat is always the biggest threat. People will bypass our enterprise solutions every time. Yeah.
But it just made everybody else so much more aware, because everybody's like, I hope Baker doesn't come and find my CAC like unsecured. Like, I better keep that with me because she'll come and grab it.
I mean, that's a brand. That's a rep.
Oh, yeah.
That person. I'm just here to keep you accountable, right? I remember when I first started attending meetings, I would literally, I don't know if people thought I was not paying attention, because I was like, I'm the person who's always typing. I don't literally stop, and I'm like engaged. Like, you can tell I'm doing like, I'm not like answering emails, but I came out of every meeting with a list of words to Google. I'm like, go Google this word. And then I wrote the phrase that people used it. I'm like, forward to SIM. Okay. And I spelled it like SEEM or something. Go find out what the SEAM is. And I'm like, that thing. Yes, I know what that is.
Yeah.
But we'll have the SIM sign debate some other time. But
yeah.
Are you a Simer? Are you a Simer or a Seamer?
Seam.
I'm a Seamer too. Are you a CISO or a CISO?
CISO.
CISO? I say CISO. CISO. Anyway.
There's no, yeah. I say CISO because there's no E in the letters.
That makes sense.
But I guess the I comes before the E in seam, so it's seam.
I take the niche approach. I don't say niche. I say niche. It's probably my French influence. I'm going to blame that on my French. Anyway, but Gen Z, the reason why talking technically is relevant to you, again, the key takeaways. Please don't be afraid to join in on the conversation. You need to do a lot of absorbing before you'll know enough to feel comfortable enough to inject yourself into those conversations.
Everybody has to start somewhere.
But you have to start somewhere. You have to start, and you have to start qualifying. And I have never met anyone who's looked me dead in the eye and been like, you don't know what that means. You're a freaking idiot. So please don't be afraid to ask the questions. We will always be like, oh, what he's talking about is this thing. Anyway, continue. Oh, and what we're talking about is how this thing is blah, 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 and with the other thing. Okay, continue. You were mad?
And the ones that don't do that are the ones that usually don't know what the jargon means.
Yeah, or they're just jerks. Either way, good to be aware of who the jerks are. But it's one of those things that eventually when you do show up and you are able to speak and you're like, I had a question about how, the rule on this port is forwarding traffic, blah, blah, blah. It really helps you demonstrate your job. It really helps you communicate without needing to actually see your job performance, that you understand how these things work together and that you can be trusted. Because Gen Z, we got to tell you, we love so much about you. We'll say it every episode. We love so much about you. But we had to fight this battle when we got here. The millennials did. People can't stand you. People can't stand you already. You have an inherent bias against you. I'm sorry. It's there. You're going to have to deal with it. So what
people
you need to
keep mistaking your generation for millennials.
Yes. Millennials have to be the intolerable ones first.
And I'm like, hey, the millennial generation is over.
Yeah.
It's been over. Stop.
Yeah. So we paved the way for y'all to walk on in uncontested. You're welcome.
Yeah.
But because a lot of people can't stand you and because you're behind on this learning curve already, it really goes so far into showing that you can handle the job, because we are going to start hiring y'all as entry-level people with no experience. And you can say, listen, I don't know what that thing is today, but ask me in a week and I will be an expert in these 3 terms that I didn't know today. Like, I will only not know that thing once. I will prove to you that I can keep up with this subject matter, with this curriculum, and I can take it and excel in it. Otherwise, no one's going to trust you with the job. You're definitely not going to get promoted and you're going to get bored. And we know you guys too. Y'all have the attention span of goldfishes, especially when it comes to projects.
So do I. So do I.
Fair. Me too. So I want to hack something different every day. But it will be the number one hurdle to you getting ahead and excelling. And again, if you're someone who's just showing up to meetings, showing up, delivering value with your words, letting the technical people know that, oh, when we have a question, we go to Nathalie because Nathalie can always explain it to us in the way that we want to receive it, versus Maril. Maril just keeps it too high level. Maril just, doesn't get into the weeds enough with us. That's not actually true. I'm good at my job. But it is the number one thing that's going to build you an internal brand for yourself, and people are going to come to you as a subject matter expert. I can't, the day that I started to be able to communicate in jargon and keep up with conversations that weren't my lane in jargon, I'm not a developer, but the day I understood what the developers were saying, I was like, I made it, you guys, holy shit. Yes, I'm one of you. We're tribe people now. Now you're
I can speak your language.
yes. Day 6 with the natives. No one suspects a thing because I sound like them. That's what you want in tech. You don't want us to be like,
Yep.
You different? No, you're not different. You're fine.
You don't know.
Yes. So speaking layman, great. A lot of cyber people don't have the ability to do the reverse. They don't have the ability to speak layman. They can't take something like Kerber roasting and break it down into simple explanations and tell a stakeholder why it's bad, which is why those of us with non-technical backgrounds like me have a niche, have an entry in. I became the face person for my team. I went to all the meetings and explained all the things, but don't lose that technical piece. You need that technical piece to float you with the teams where the cred actually matters. So develop these skills. We're going to add some resources in the notes if you've got an interest. We're also going to keep a running list of all the new terms we use in every episode to make sure that you can keep up with the conversations that we are having. And if you come across any terms we haven't explained, feel free to drop those in the comments.
We will gladly answer them and explain what they do, because it's important to know what they do.
It is important to know what they do. It's important to, I always tell people, you don't need like an A+ or a net plus level of understanding, but you need a sec plus. You need like the data flow overview. I don't need to know how a firewall communicates with the router. I just need to know the purpose that each of them serves, the aspects of security they address, and possible ways to attack those things.
Whereas on my side of security, you have to know how they interact and where to put rules at, because the like where the rules lie at in the ACL, which is the Your Access Control List, it's really important. If you have it too high up, too high down, you could be letting things in that you don't want to let in. So
yeah, I know what that is and what it does. I know the ACL is the thing that determines whether or not you can have access to this thing, but do I care about how it works? No. That's why having so many different people in cyber is so important. Having your different roles is important. So help me God, if one more person brings their laptop to me and says, Maril, I know this isn't your job, but can you help me fix it? I'm like, that's literally the opposite of my job. My job is to break it better. If you don't want it more broken, take it down the street. I cannot help you.
Yeah.
So next time we'll have a lesson in offensive security and exactly what we're capable of doing. And I was like, even if I knew how to fix your problem, hopefully our group policies don't let me, because I shouldn't have local admin access to your machine.
You're gonna
have to put in a ticket.
Yeah.
I shouldn't, but
you have to put in a ticket. Sometimes the minute you say ticket to a user, they're just like, what? What's a ticket? I just call the number.
Ticket is where hopes and dreams go to die.
Yeah. Sometimes. Depends on who it has the ticket.
Yeah, it depends. Okay, that's all we've got for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we hope that above all else, you understand the importance of learning to speak technically. We hope that you aren't afraid to enter those conversations with your peers and ask questions. We hope you're never afraid to be the quote stupid person in the room, even though no one is really stupid. No one woke up knowing all this stuff intrinsically. I definitely didn't. Natalie, your favorite key takeaways?
Don't be afraid to ask. Make sure that you understand what the person is actually telling you. So if they're explaining it to you in a way that you don't quite understand, one of my favorite things to do when I'm training somebody is every now and then I'll be like, do you understand what I just said? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll be like, so can you explain it to me in a different way? Just to check on their learning so that I can ensure that my ADHD didn't get in the way of them actually learning the concept and the fundamental. So make sure that if you don't understand what they're actually saying, you ask them to elaborate or explain it differently. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3 times for somebody to explain it to you differently.
And you cyber professionals, if someone comes to you and asks you a question, don't be that jerk. You know this all out of high school either.
Nobody knew this day one, and it's just so mind-boggling that people still feel that they need to be jerks about it. Like,
yeah, if that's you, we're gonna find you, the cyber queens. We're gonna
get the vigilantes of justice.
Yeah, just protecting people. One jerk face in a time. That's what we do. All right. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We love you. We hope you go out there and succeed. Please leave your questions in the comments and hit that subscribe button for more for more great cyber tips. Bye.